we did this youth engagement survey where we're asking kids, what is it that is troubling you? And the biggest response is mental health. Like, that is what kids are concerned about.
Yeah. That survey was...
It's mind-blowing, isn't it? I know.
Yeah.
I know. So what's nice about this survey is that it'll be a great data set to then go after grant money too, to explain why we need wellness dogs. Because York County children are saying that mental health is a concern. And so the whole point of the Safer Together chats is for us to bring together people in the community and then law enforcement specifically to talk about how we can go after these problems together collectively.
Interesting enough on that subject, though. I think that there's a couple things with that survey. I think that mental health has definitely increased in the younger population, but I also think that it's just one of the things is it's recognized more so.
I see. So it's always been an issue.
I don't necessarily think there's more. I think that we just recognize it more, and it's more in the forefront, and it's okay to talk about it.
Yeah.
It's acceptable.
I would agree 100%.
Yeah.
Like, again, I don't think, we're closer in age than you are and I, but I don't think our generation had any less struggles. Then it wasn't acceptable to say I'm hurting. It was like, suck it up.
It's not recognized. Yeah.
So
that was the mentality.
Why is that?
And I'll go back as early as 8 years ago. Trent died in 2015. Mm-hmm. I talked to the coroner on the phone. I'm like, let's scream this to the highest mountain. We got mental health issues going on here. We have problems.
Right.
Bart, could you give us a little background on your son?
So, real quickly, he loved his country. He wanted to join the. He was in second grade when 9/11 happened, and he made this collage. On one side, it's a collage of the American flag, and I carry it everywhere I go. And then on the other side, it's "I love America." That's what it said. And it's just so it's almost like he took that personal. So he wanted to become a soldier. I have a military history in my family. Actually, he wanted to fly F-14s, but he was always that kid who gave it his best, 100%, stuck up for everybody, loved baseball and football, but was always second string. That person the kid who would do his best, but just wasn't very athletic or anything like that. He was a roly-poly, chubby kid. Well, he grew up to be this muscular. He got himself in physical shape and went in the military. I made him go to the reserves. He wanted to be full-time. He wanted to get deployed. Mm-hmm. I'll be honest with you. I think had he been deployed, he'd have never come back. He'd have taken a bullet for someone. Mm-hmm. But that's the kind of kid he was. But went in, and then I wanted him to go to college. He really didn't want to. So he went to Shippensburg for a year, and after the first semester, his grade point average was 1.7. Like, yeah, I got in a little trouble with that.
Yeah,
maybe college is. He said, Dad, I'm going to do better, I promise.
So he wanted to stay in.
Huh?
He wanted to stay in then.
Yeah, he wanted to stay. He wanted, it was for me. I know darn well it was for me. He wanted to please everybody, including me. He didn't want to disappoint me. And people that die by suicide, that's what they don't want to do. They don't want to disappoint him. But anyway, so. He the second semester, he gave it his all, and his grade point average went down to 1.5.
Oh no!
So they told him not to come back. And I remember that day. He was in tears, but we got through it. And then that summer was pretty tough. He got a relationship with alcohol, and probably had a relationship early on with alcohol. And as a parent, I overlooked it. I knew darn well when he was a senior in high school after football games, I knew what they were doing, and I never addressed it.
Which is understandable, because that is kind of a normal phase of teenagehood. I mean, most of us go through the same phase, so you don't really, hindsight's 20/20.
Yeah. And I told him, I said, listen, I know what you guys are doing over at this person's house, but you better not leave. He said, Dad, no, we always put our keys in a pot and everything else. I say, but there's always one who's going to grab them and do something stupid. But, he stuck out for those other people, so... the day he died, August 19th, he was screwing up. He wasn't getting a job. He wasn't doing the things he needed to do. And he come home and him and I physically fought. I was pissed off. I was upset, and I told him he started to act like the people that he despised because of his relationship with alcohol. And I went to pick up my grandson, came home, and found him in the laundry. He had, I missed him by four minutes. It was from the time I called 911 to the time he sent a message to his ex-girlfriend at the time that he was struggling with. And, he said, "I love you. I'm going to go away for a little bit, but you're a great person, and I'll see you soon." And came in, did some CPR on him, and it was not only, I lived in Helm, and I had worked for Helm at the time, and
Pelham Police Department?
yeah, and I'll never forget that touch on my shoulder. Called Bruce, he's gone, let him go. But it was one of the guys I used to work with on the job, so there's a lot of trauma there for those guys too.
Because when you called 911, your fellow department showed up, and so they were coworkers, their family.
Yeah, I wasn't with Helm at the time. I was with the public defender's office, but yeah, it was my brother's fire company. Guys on the ambulance crew went to school with him. So it was a lot of collateral damage.
Well, and that kind of thing, it seems to be, now that I'm understanding more about police and the working, that is kind of a normal thing, that they are encountering trauma on a weekly basis, and then they've got to go back to work too, And so, Officer Reinert, you see that a lot with your department.
Yeah, I mean, it's truly the only job where, anytime when we have someone ask about, okay, what is policing about, it really is the only job where, like, you're responding to everybody's worst day. So, people don't call the police because they're having a good day.
Yeah,
they're calling the police. And it's not always something super traumatic, but it's always something negative, right? So you really do have to fight that part of your psyche because, if you're constantly seeing negative things, you start, and you see that a lot in the police world, where people just start to feel negative, negative about the people they work for, and negative about the people out in public. So you have to fight that. You have to actively work on understanding that there's still good people in the world, because all you're really seeing as a police officer is the negative side most of the time. So that's one of the reasons why we want to work on, having positive things with the public.
And just framing it. Just framing it differently.
Right, and understanding that there's still good out here, even though we're constantly seeing the bad. So that's important to do that.
And if you look back when I was on the job, I retired in 2009, it was, even back then, we were told just to suck it up.
Yeah.
It may be happening now on the job?
I think it's happening less, and there's a couple of reasons.
Right.
I think that, we've really actively started to recognize, especially in the past 10 to 15 years, how high the suicide rate is. The suicide rate amongst police officers is much higher than the regular public. Kind of makes sense if you think about it. The amount of stuff that officers are exposed to. So I think, once we started recognizing that, then we started recognizing, okay, what can we do different to change this statistic? Now, it's still high.
Sure.
But it's definitely come down some over the years we've been working on it. But it's still much higher than what it should be.
And I don't think the general public understands why people die by suicide. I really don't think that they do.
Yeah.
I mean, you would look at it from, and you could tell me differently maybe, but, well, he's supposed to be this tough police officer, and Trent's supposed to be this tough soldier. Why are they taking their own lives? And it's because they care more about it, and they have that pain from stuff that nobody can imagine. As a police officer, we used to take it personal that, oh my God, that child that was just victimized, or we go out to an accident scene and see people that have died, and it's like we feel almost responsible for that. I know I'm not responsible, but every day, first thing that I do is go through my process of going, what could I have done to save my son's life? And I think I'll do that for the rest of my life, but that's my process of how I have to get my day started so that I don't dwell on it all day long and go, okay, well,
Right.
maybe you could have done this, this, and that, Bruce. And then the last thing I tell myself, it was still his choice. It was still his pain. It was a pain that you can't even imagine. So.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I think that back then, even growing up, I was told kind of just to suck things up, whether you got hurt or you've had a bad day. It's like, kind of deal with it, get up, rub some dirt on it, and keep moving. I think it's really important to address the mental health of, people and police officers, because that is true. You can have some of the biggest, toughest people that really, they may not show it at first, but they do really care about their job. They care about the people that they're helping, and that can change someone, that can eat them up from the inside and make them become like some of the things that they despise the most. And I see it every day, just working in the trucking industry. I've seen some really old truck drivers, and they'll tell me, yeah, I used to love the job. I used to really enjoy it, but they deal with people, who are causing trouble on the roads. They deal with rude customers, rude bosses, people who take advantage of them. Then they get overwhelmed with stress, and some of it can even be fear, and it consumes them, and it changes the type of person you are.
What kind of things have you done to address that stress? Because we all clearly, mental health is at the forefront, and so we take efforts to recognize our own coping mechanisms. So what are some of the things that you've done to help with your mental health?
Some of the things that I've had to do was just become more self-aware. Growing up, I didn't really believe in mental health. I thought it was just something like, oh, they need to get over it, or they need to.
And how old are you?
I'm 19.
So this is not that long ago. This is
Right.
like current day.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm 19. I turn 20 next month.
You look a little older than that, by the way.
I was going to say the same thing.
I get told that a lot. But I grew up, like I said, just, because I think that's how my parents were raised too. Just kind of like move on. Mental health wasn't really talked about it. I didn't believe in it. So the things that I had to do is become more self-aware, kind of take the steps on my own to learn more about it. It didn't really hit me until I started dealing with it myself. For years, or at least it was probably about a year and a half, I was just asking myself, why am I irritated all the time? Why am I angry? Why am I lashing out at the people that I love? And I didn't really understand, so I went to talk to somebody about it, and they were telling me all these things. It's like, nah, I don't really, it doesn't seem something that's right. And then they talk about medication, and I went that route. That didn't really fix it. I think what really made it bad for me was the withdrawal, because I was the type of person to withdraw from people when it got difficult.
Like emotionally?
Emotionally, physically, kind of just doing my own thing, whether that's, just working very hard, or I was in school at the time, so studying. Also grew up, it was just my mom. My mom and dad was separated, so it was just me helping her, raise my sisters basically, because she's a nurse. She works night shift, 12 hours every single day, comes home, sleeps, get the sisters to school, take myself to school, come back, do the work, get everyone home. That's pretty much how it went. So I didn't really have time for myself. I just kind of, I guess, avoided it. So just recently, being a truck driver, I had a lot of time to myself. Now that can be really good, it can be really bad, because you can be alone with your thoughts. And if you're not really in the right headspace, I feel like your thoughts can take a hold of you and steer you in the wrong direction.
Very true.
But
Absolutely.
I took that time to come closer to God in my faith, and just really try to go back to what happened, and kind of like what we talked about earlier, how trauma shapes people.
Yeah.
I think trauma is like a mask over people's true identity, their real character, because it comes from, I believe, just like the natural root of anxiety, your body trying to protect you and not let whatever happened happen again. And that makes us kind of angry at other people and tighten up and just want to protect everything. So it's like if we just stuff all those feelings down because we're told just to suck it up, that's what happens. We blow up and we don't get the chance to kind of fix those issues.
How many times have we heard someone say, you know, I just saw that cop crying over there and helping somebody and everything else, man, he's a tough cookie. But we say that, I just saw that important person who just, man, they got to be tough. They can take all this stuff and they don't show any emotion about that. But to me, that's the complete opposite of what we need to do.
Yeah.
You know, when we talk the words mental health, everybody gets scared. But wait a minute, think about it. When you talk about mental health and suicide, it's anxiety and depression are the ones that are dying by suicide. And you tell me that there's absolutely nobody in this world that hasn't experienced some type of mental health.
Everybody.
Now, it hasn't been a crisis maybe, just a matter of, you've been anxious? I know when I was on a job, I'd get anxious a lot of times.
Yeah.
And that somebody said the word fear. Any cop who said you wasn't scared, come on. That's the one that we need to get to, because I'm scared, you're scared, and it's a good fear. But it just matters what end of the spectrum you're on with your anxiety and your fear.
Yep.
So we've all experienced it, but the ones, take your worst moment, multiply it by infinity. Those are the ones who are dying by suicide, because that's their pain.
Right, they haven't dealt with it. It's still inside them,
Exactly.
and it has nowhere else to go.
I find it really hard sometimes. The longer I do this, the harder I find it to understand, is because of the fact, exactly what you said, that everyone experiences some sort of mental health challenge in their lifetime.
Absolutely.
I've never met a human being who hasn't, right?
Yeah.
But yet, there still is that stigma around it. And the more I think about it, the more I try to figure it out, the less I have a way to figure it out. Because, again, and I think what it is maybe just human nature, that we don't always think about or react to things until it happens to us or impacts us. And that's the only way I can kind of rationalize it, is that's just natural human behavior, to not be concerned about something till it impacts us. Now, we've gotten better as human beings. We've gotten better. But we still have that, and I can just say from, working in the police world, is you find that quite frequently, that someone who is viewed upon as being tough, and it's especially hard being a male, I'm going to tell you that, because males, and if you think about how males and females are raised, females, it's quite acceptable to be emotional and to be, caring and kind. That's what you expect as a female, right? You're expected to do that. You're raised from a little girl into adulthood doing that. And most males are not raised that way. Right? It's getting better, right? Because we're recognizing it's getting better. But males tend to, be raised as, oh, you got to be tough. Just like you were saying, put some dirt on it and you'll be fine, right? That's the way. And I think that, part of that is, the way we are emotionally kind of fits to some extent with that, and we are generally viewed upon as the fixers, men and women. Men fix things, and that kind of parlays into police work. Now, again, there are definitely females that fit that role too, but in general, when you're talking about generalities and maybe why some of these things happen, it is definitely harder, I think, for a male to let emotion out, and you have to actively work on being okay with it.
So how can we normalize that?
First of all, if you look at cops, what do? We solve problems.
Yeah,
right.
We're problem solvers.
We're problem solvers, and when we can't fix it, it affects us. Yep. And you said about also, it doesn't. we don't really become involved with it until it affects us personally.
Yeah.
Guilty?
I mean, I think we all
I'll be
are.
honest with you. Not that I didn't care, but I didn't get involved with it because it didn't affect me. But when Trent died, it really affected me. You know, obviously it's, so I never really thought about what other people were thinking. It didn't matter what other people were thinking. I was a cop on the job, and my job was to go out and arrest people and put them in jail. You know, now recently, like I said, I just did the graduation speech for the treatment course, and one of the things I said to them, you know, this is one thing I say about Trent, 1 weak moment does not define you. You know, it doesn't. And that's why I told these people, yeah, you have trauma in your life. Are those the causes of it? Doesn't matter. Yes, let's say those are the causes of why you broke the law or why you did what you did. And you had some weak moments. That doesn't define you. What defines you is that you are now correcting those moments and you've taken the chose to do what you're doing to make yourself better and be a better part of the community. So, and then we talk about even in a cultural way, I don't know what it's like for an African American to feel the things that you do. You know, I can tell you a quick story one time, real quick. I worked for Hallam Township, and a van broke down along the side of the road, and it was it was all black people in the van and a pastor. They were going out to a church in Reading, and it was kind of adorable to me. Is they were all females. They had the hats on from like the 60s. You would think of like I don't even know how to describe it, but so I pull over to give them. I say, hey, what's wrong? Like the van broke down. So I'm sitting there talking to the pastor, and he said, have you called anybody? He says, yeah, we called a friend of ours. We're talking, and it's like an hour had gone by. I'm like, when is your friend going to get here? And he says, he's been by 4 times, and he's not going to stop until you leave.
Wow.
And I'm like, why? I'm a cop here to help you. But that relationship early on with racism and everything that happened here in the 60s and all, that carried over to 2005, and so it's the same thing. That is how you're raised as a black man. From what you were taught from your parents is different than how I was raised, especially when it comes to mental health. And I have no idea how we're going to change that.
It's going to take time. Nasei, could you speak to that?
Yeah, no, I think it, obviously a lot of kind of what I was brought up on and what I think a lot of people were brought up on is just because the past, we all know just kind of how things were, and a lot of it has to do with fear, and it's a constant, sometimes it's like a constant battle at each other, you know, people fighting for rights, people fighting for equality, and just overall safety, but there's no one kind of understanding each other's side, because, you know, I've had to acknowledge that police do a very hard job, and it's not as simple as them separating their emotions from the job. We're all human beings, and we were all raised certain ways from our families. We're all taught certain things, and it kind of takes the step of each individual person to say, hey, that's not right. Even though I was raised this way, I think we need to change something. It's like, for me, I need to understand why, say a police officer may be having a bad day. They see only negative things every single day. They have to solve problems that no one else has to solve. And mental health wasn't brought up. It wasn't widespread. And they're dealing with that on the inside. And then, you know, how do I say it? I think people just always revert to the past, and it infuriates both sides, and I really don't have the answer on how to solve it. Like you said, I think it'll take time for the both of us, but we really just have to look at each other's sides.
I think what you said is a good point, and I think it is the way to solve it, and that's each individual person has to work on it.
Absolutely.
Right? But the more we talk about these things openly, and the more we acknowledge these things, the easier it becomes for individual people to work on it.
Acknowledging.
So,
That's a great first
acknowledging
step.
it, and you know, I think we're doing a better job at that, right? We looked in the police world, and we're like, okay, we acknowledge that we got some issues we have to deal with, right?
Right.
you know, and I think by acknowledging it, it's going to take time for us. I mean, there's a culture that exists
Yeah.
that, you know, again, having weakness and acknowledging mental health is a hard barrier to break in the police world and in the military world, right? It's getting better in both worlds, but it's still underlying, it's still there, right?
Yeah.
It's still that stigma of I'm admitting that I am not as tough as the exterior shows, right?
And what we
that
have to
is hard.
change with that is that you are admitting, so you actually are tougher.
Correct.
I think,
You're absolutely right.
yeah,
Yeah.
Is acknowledging your weakness and then working through it
absolutely.
is actually a lot tougher.
One acknowledging
Right.
are not the weak ones. They're the tough ones.
Let's say someone
Yeah,
watching
that's
this knows someone in their life who they think might be struggling with mental health. It sounds like they acknowledge, and it sounds like you just should have asked, are you doing okay? So what can we do to help people in our lives that might be struggling?
Yeah, I thought about this one a lot because I have a lot of personal experience with this. I mean, right now I'm going through some personal stuff with family members that I'm trying to help. And, you know, the underlying thing I think is that just acknowledging that something's wrong, recognizing it, you know, if someone is, you know, having different behavior than you're used to seeing, number one, it's not always easy to pick out, right? But if you know somebody well, you're probably going to recognize something's not. I'm recognizing something because there's, for lack of a better way to say it, like that spidey sense you have, like
Yeah.
you know something's
Your
not right,
intuition.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And instead of just avoiding, sometimes just do a check-in with them. You know, say, you know, I'm noticing, you know, maybe you're acting a little different. Are you okay? Is there some way I can help you? Just and opening up the door to allow them to talk. Now, that doesn't always happen easily,
Yeah.
right? Sometimes it might be a process where, you know, but temper it and be careful about what you're saying, but but acknowledge that, hey, I'm here for you if you need me.
Right.
And maybe check on them a couple times, because I've found, especially what I do now in the wellness with officers, is it might take 1 or 2 or 3 times just checking in with them before they might open up,
Right.
I see.
you know? So don't always give up on the first time. When
Oh,
you're,
absolutely.
But don't push somebody. That's the other key that I found is, like, if you push somebody too hard, they might recoil a little bit and kind of like get that defensive mode that you're talking about. Which you're right, you're spot on with that, and I think that if you just, you know, it's like a nice slow process.
Exactly.
Just check 2 or 3 times. Keep checking. If you're noticing something really serious, then you might have to say, you know, I'm really noticing you're really, really down. You know, you're laying on the couch. You know, it depends on how close a relationship
Right, it
you
depends.
have with them too. But yeah, I
It's-
mean, that's what I would say.
It's kind of